Shabbat Shalom, everyone. How are you? Today's Torah portion is Tetzaveh. Do you remember last week when we looked at the Mishkan? Right here is the altar of incense. Now, we didn't talk about that last week because it's in this week's Torah portion. So, do you know what incense is? Incense is stuff that smells good when you burn it, like a candle that smells good when you burn it. Well, the incense rises before Adonai, and he says that our prayers rise up to him as a sweet-smelling incense. Do you think the priest prays too? He does. Yes. So this is the last thing that the priest comes to before he enters the Holy of Holies. So let's think about what the priest, the high priest who's about to be entering the Holy of Holies, let's think about what he might be praying about. This is something like maybe what the priest's, the high priest's breastplate looked like. It had different stones. Each stone was a different kind of gem, and each one had one of the names of the tribes of Israel on it. One stone for each tribe. And what's neat is every single one of them is different because the tribes were different. They had different callings. They had different jobs to do. There is diversity in the unity. What's really cool is that in our Torah portion, in Exodus chapter 28, verse 29, it says, whenever Aaron enters the holy place, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel over his heart on the breastpiece of decision as a continuing memorial before the Lord. Also, put the Urim and the Thummim in the breastpiece, so that they may be over Aaron's heart whenever he enters the presence of the Lord. The Urim and the Thummim were rocks that there were two of them, and each one was engraved with 6 names of the tribes of Israel, 6 on one and 6 on the other. And they were tucked into a pocket in the back of the breastpiece. So there were those 2 rocks, and the high priest would use those rocks to find out what God was telling him. Today we don't use them. We can find out what God is telling us through the Bible and through prayer, but this is how the high priest was told by God to say, hey, this is how I want to tell you what to do. So he would put that over his heart, and this would be all connected with it over his heart. Thus Aaron will always bear the means of making decisions for the Israelites over his heart before the Lord. Isn't that cool? So when the high priest is standing at the altar of incense, do you think he might be praying about what God's decisions might be? How about, do you think he might be praying for the people in the tribes of Israel? Those things, the decisions that God makes and the tribes are on his heart. Now let's think about Yeshua being our high priest, because we know that everything else in the tabernacle and the Mishkan teaches us about Yeshua. So do you think this teaches us about Yeshua too? Yeah, I think so. So in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 24 and 25, it says, since Yeshua lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God, who draw near to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. So when we're coming to draw near to God, this is the path we're supposed to take. And when we draw near to God, we're not alone, because our high priest, Yeshua the Messiah, is praying for us. And in Romans 8, it says that who is he that condemns? Yeshua Messiah, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. So who can separate us from the love of Messiah? And in verse 26, it says, in the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints in accordance with God's will. So before the high priest enters the Holy of Holies, where the mercy seat is, where God meets with us, he holds the people of God in his heart and he is praying. Yeshua does that for you. Yeshua does that for me. He is our high priest. Hallelujah. Through him, we can come and draw near to God. Shabbat Shalom.